So I just watched the FNAF movie, and to keep it simple, I was surprised.
It's just a theory.
Now going into this movie, I didn't really have too many expectations, and I know I'm like late as hell in this movie, but I've been trying to catch up on a lot of shit lately. But I didn't really know what to expect going into the Five Nights at Freddy's movie because I didn't know what type of horror movie that we were gonna get with. I didn't know if we were gonna get like, you know, kind of like a psychological horror or like just a straight up like slasher movie or whatever the fuck. So going into it, I had no expectations and I didn't really know what to expect. And I came out really surprised. Because I feel like with this movie, everything was really like experimental. I feel like everything going into this movie was them just experimenting with things and experimenting with, you know, actors and how the animatronics look and experimenting how they're gonna try to incorporate the lore of this franchise, because this franchise has been going on for damn near 10 years. Next year it'll be 10 fucking years since the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. So you're trying to make a movie with 10 years worth of lore and all the books and all the games, all the spin-off games, everything. It's like I can understand them kind of not really knowing which direction to go with as far as like what type of horror movie this will be, how the sequels will look, how the animatronic suits will act, things like that. But I can say that with the type of horror movie that this ended up being, I was really fucking surprised and I wasn't disappointed, to be honest with you. I didn't want to go in with high expectations because I knew this wasn't going to be like, you know, the greatest movie of all time, but I really was impressed with what they were able to do with it, especially since they made it kind of like, you know, baby's first horror movie. But this is the horror movie that you would show like, you know, people that aren't really into horror like that, or like, you know, like a teenager or some shit like that. It's really not like, this isn't for like people who watch horror movies all the time, because then it won't be scary to you at all. Like, this movie doesn't have that many jump scares, and even for me, I don't really watch horror movies a lot, but I sat through this relatively like with no problem because it's not that scary. So it's not necessarily like, oh, you know, like I really gotta like prepare to watch this. It's not bad at all, and I really fuck with that, because I would have been more surprised if we got, you know, like a really like dark and gritty horror movie with Five Nights at Freddy's, because I feel like with them trying to kind of like test the waters with this first movie, it would have been more surprising if they had more of an idea of how to, you know, attack this type of movie. Because with the way that the games work, you would think that it would be this dark horror, like this really gory horror movie about like the missing kids and stuff like that. Or the route that I thought they were gonna take was this was gonna be like a psychological horror where Mike is basically trapped in the he's basically trapped inside the Freddy's place for the 5 nights, and not like, you know, be able to go home and shit like that, where he's like trapped there for 5 days, and like over the course of the 5 nights they like fuck with him more, like scare him more and shit like that. But if they do that for sequels, I feel like that would be like a dope idea for like a sequel, especially for like the sequels pertaining to like Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and 3. I feel like if they keep the person like in, you know, like the restaurant or like in whatever location they have for like the second and third movies, I feel like keeping them like in the place for the 5 nights and kind of like have them like be stuck there, or like it'd be more of a psychological horror movie, or like a psychological thriller with like a little bit of a slasher element to it. I feel like it'll like add that element of like scariness to it, because just like an overall review of the movie was good, but it does need to be like just a little bit more scary, because like the creepiness, because the creepy factor of the movie was great. The movie like throughout the entire time was creepy as fuck, especially every time they were like, especially every night that he was at, you know, the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and shit. Every night that he was there, they definitely nailed the creepiness factor of the animatronics and like the place in general, but they need to like amp it up like just a little bit so that you can like feel it more. They need to add like that extra oomph to it so that you really actually feel scared and not just kind of like, oh, like that's kind of creepy or whatever. Because that's kind of mainly what it felt like. Oh, like that's creepy, that's scary, like I wouldn't go in there. It wasn't like a, oh shit, like that was really fucking scary. But for what it was, I really fucked. And honestly, as far as the characters go in the movie, I feel like they all did like, you know, a sustainable job as far as, you know, the acting and everything like that. Everybody was kind of like, you know, one dimensional. Like there wasn't really like, you know, there wasn't like a lot of like depth to the characters, because I feel like this is still I feel like this was more like a tryout movie like they were trying a bunch of stuff to see what sticked and what didn't really work. I feel like the only thing that didn't really work was like, if I had to pick something that didn't really work, I feel like the aunt storyline was kind of forced. It didn't really like add anything to the story. She just kind of seemed like an extra character to kind of like drive like some of the plot forward and to give like, you know, a couple more scares into the movie without you know, and also to kind of like show off the animatronic just a little bit more. But like the aunt storyline didn't really feel like it was really like needed. Like I wouldn't want that in the other sequels, because I feel like in the other sequels like that type of storyline would kind of like take away from the movie and like the plot itself, because the more they dive into the sequels and shit, the more like lore heavy they're gonna have to be and more like storyline heavy they're gonna have to do. So I feel like they'll need to stick to the main storyline a lot more and not necessarily focus on like a side storyline, like, you know, him losing his sister to like his crazy aunt or some shit like that. But honestly, outside of the aunt, I don't really have too many complaints about like, you know, the characters and things like that, because everybody was really one-dimensional because they were just trying a bunch of shit to see what sticks. So I didn't really have any complaints as far as character wise. My main like, I guess like concern is like how they're gonna do the sequels, because I would prefer if they like, you know, make it just a little bit more serious. Like I get like, you know, they're kind of like having like, you know, like little jokes in there, like whatever, like when fucking Freddy got in the car with Corey Kenshin and shit or whatever. That was cool. Like I didn't mind the cameos, nothing like that. But I feel like when they get to the sequels, they just like, you know, make it, you know, more seriously and like, you know, to the point with like the scares and shit like that. I feel like it'll make it a better horror movie, because it wasn't really a horror movie. It was kind of like, I guess you could call it a thriller. You know what I'm saying? Because it wasn't really scary. It was just kind of like, you know, a run-of-the-mill, like, you know, haunted house type movie. It wasn't really a horror movie. Like, it wasn't nothing scary about it. But I feel like if they lean more into like the lore and shit, because if you look into the lore, especially if the sequels, darker and darker and darker. So I really feel like they lean more into the lore and make it more of a serious movie. Not like take itself too seriously, because the premise of it is like, you know, silly as hell. But I feel like if they lean more towards the lore and make it more of a serious horror movie and lean more towards the psychological thriller aspect of it, I feel like it'll be a better movie around. I feel like it'll be a better all-around horror movie and make it an actual horror movie and not just like a haunted house type of. And with the sequels in mind, I would love to see how they're gonna tackle every other animatronic in the movie, because as the sequels go on, not only does the lore get like more and more deep, they add so many more animatronics. It's kind of crazy. Cause if my memory serves me right, in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, they add about 3 more animatronics to it, because I know they add Balloon Boy and the puppet, and I think they add another animatronic. I'm not sure, but as the series goes on, they add more and more animatronic to the story, and they add, you know, more brand new ones to the story. So not only do they have to keep going with the lore of the games, they have to introduce the animatronics and their lore, because at least for the main animatronics, they all have their own lore to them, because a majority of them are like attached to like, you know, a different child and things like that. Like they might be attached to a different child that was like kidnapped by a, you know, that was like kidnapped or killed a certain way. So I would just be wondering how they're going to introduce the rest of the animatronics and how they're going to like tell their stories, and not just, you know, tell the stories of the characters, but also tell the story of the animatronics. Also tell William Afton's story and how they're going to keep bringing him back. Are they just going to be like, oh, he came back from the dead, or are they going to do it in a different way, or are they going to present him in a different way and things like that? And also how they're going to, you know, mimic the rest of the pizza places, because in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 it's a different place, and the same thing in 3, and also it's a really different place in 4. If they ever do get to Five Nights at Freddy's 4 and on, the scenes get different and the lore gets deeper. So I would just be more curious and concerned about how they're going to deal with the sequels, depending on how many sequels we get with the movies. And I would hope that they're of the same quality of the first one, because overall I really fucked with this movie, and I hope that they're able to keep the momentum of this movie series going, because I would love for, you know, this story to be fleshed out in real life, to see, you know, what they change and to see if they'll make the story even better. Who fucking knows? But I'm hopeful for the future with the sequels. I really like this movie. Appreciate y'all for watching.